And then also that recording will be sent out later on this afternoon. So if you want to go back and reference anything that is covered during the session, feel free to do so. Also attached to that is a questionnaire. I will actually share that questionnaire towards the end of the session. So we value your opinion as students and alumni. We certainly want to take that into consideration, and we do. We've hosted a few different, we call them themed weeks around some of the feedback that we've received. So we certainly want you to put in that input and give us that feedback so that we can try to provide you with better presentations that align with your career goals. So keep that in mind moving forward. From here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it over to our presenter, give a little introduction. Kina, if you want to introduce yourself, kind of share your story a little bit, and then we can dive into, career transitions.
Perfect. Thank you, RJ. And thank you for having me. I'm so excited about this because I have become so passionate about career transitions. So when we talked about this, I was like, yes, I would love to do this and talk about career transitions. So hello, everyone. My name is Kina Williams. I am currently an MBA candidate graduating within like 2 months from WGU with the MBA IT management. Yes, thank you. I am, my background was in digital campaigns, digital marketing, social media, and community management for luxury retailers. I don't know if I'm sure everyone's heard of Barney's New York, but that was where I got my start with that. Um, and I actually live in Miami now, but I'm originally from New Jersey, RJ, so you're really not by yourself. I transitioned to Miami during the pandemic, and we'll get into that was the start of my career transition unexpectedly.
And the question that I have, and for people, if you have questions throughout this, feel free post those into the chat. If you want to raise your hand, we'll call on you. This is going to be an interactive session. We certainly don't want it to just be us chit chatting up here. So certainly feel free to jump in if you have questions. We highly recommend that. For me, Kina, the first thing I'd love to know is what kind of caused you to one consider WGU? Was there something specific that maybe you were thinking about that caused you to attend WGU, or that excited you about the opportunity to find WGU? I think for us, it's always fascinating to hear, why WGU? Why did you decide that that was the route that you wanted to go with?
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a few things. One, it was that it was online. That was the first thing. And then the other thing was the tuition, right? Like I was like, oh wow, I can get my MBA for this. And although I didn't do it, but seeing that people were able to finish in a short period of time or take, I mean, for me, I'm actually approaching maybe 16 months. So that's pretty short for me to, finish my MBA. So those are really like the reasons. And I think when I spoke to someone on the phone, this is kind of what solidified it for me. And I'll just, dive in because like RJ said, this is really just a transparent conversation about career transitions. And so if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll just, answer it for you on the spot. So um when I spoke to someone after I was like accepted, and I was coming in initially saying that I wanted to get my master's in um, cybersecurity. And then I looked at that. So I am very strategic, a very strategic thinker. And I looked at the cybersecurity and I said, oh, that's very certification heavy. Right? It's very certification heavy for me because I'm not a technical person. So I said, maybe not. I've always had a small business in the background of everything I did. So I felt like an MBA would work better for me. But at first, I was going to do a master's in IT management. When I spoke to someone, this is what really said, okay, this is for me, because I felt like they cared. She was listening, and everything I told her about what my plans were, she was like, I don't think that a master's of IT management would be good for you. I think an MBA of IT management would. And I had already been thinking about that. So that was just like perfect. This is where I want to be. So that really was it. Yeah.
And as you kind of, well, I guess let's touch on like your transitioning through your career. So could you, go into more detail as far as what you were doing pre WGU in your previous career, and how did you kind of transition and decide, okay, that's the direction that I ultimately want to go?
Yeah. Okay. So again, I was working at Barney's New York. This was my dream job. I'm a fashion girl. So having the job of being able to go to all the stores and take pictures and create content and speak to, like customers online. And I actually built out the community management program at Barney's. We didn't have anything like that. I started my career there in customer service, but I was coming on to start working in social media and digital marketing. And I realized that as we're online, putting these campaigns together, we got customers underneath the post that are like, where's my order? So it was kind of like we have to start meeting the customers where they are. So I designed this program, and it ended up being, what we called community management. And so I became like the first community manager for Barney's. This was my dream job. I had no plans on going anywhere. So there was not a career transition in sight. We were actually, Barney's went bankrupt for anyone that doesn't know, but we were actually planning on opening a store in Miami, which is initially why I was moving to Miami. Um, and so Barney's goes bankrupt. The company that buys them as part of the transition, because I was helping with the transition of all of the digital aspects and the, digital archives of Barney's, I was helping with that transition. And then I ended up going over for a job and doing the same thing, starting community management programs for Tiffany's, for a lot of the, like other brands, and staying on with Barney's. Maybe that happened in like December, and then that following April, COVID just comes out of nowhere. And literally, we were in the office and they said, work from home for 2 weeks. And then we got an email that said there's going to be a call. This was 2 weeks after COVID happened. And because I had just went through what I did with Barney's, I felt like this doesn't sound like this is going to be a good call. And that was it. 2 weeks into COVID, they had let the entire digital marketing team go. For me, I talked to my husband and I said, this was my dream job. And I always call it like the pretty fun job. And I said, this was my dream job. But when there's a pandemic, I do not want to be one of the first people that's not needed. And so that started me to think about, I have some time where I can figure out what I want to do. And it was just, let me start weighing my options, because it just didn't feel good that 2 weeks into COVID, I was one of the first people to be let go. Right. And it was just because who's thinking about social media and coming up with stories and taking pictures of clothes when we have no idea what's going on during the pandemic. So I've always been interested in cybersecurity. And that also was because during my tenure at Barney's, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it was like the first like ransom attack on UPS. And because of that, it kind of stifled the deliveries from Barney's. And I was like, what's happening? UPS can't deliver any of our packages because they were under a ransom attack. So that was kind of fascinating to me, but my career was moving fast. So there really wasn't for me to just say, hey, let me start looking into cybersecurity. So that's kind of where I got more into after being laid off and during that COVID period. It was like, I got some time to think, let's figure this out. And I initially did not fall on WGU. I initially went the route of a boot camp. which we're all here as WGU students. So that's definitely not something that I, recommend. I am a person that likes to just get something out of it. So a lot of what I got out of it was that I'm not technical. I don't want to do networking. I don't want to do pen testing, because somewhere in my mind, I watch a lot of TV, and I honestly thought that I would probably be like the person that they call in at the last minute to put the code in to stop everything from like blowing up. But when I realized that I'm definitely not good at any of that, I don't want to. I can code, but I don't want to do it. So that kind of pushed that out of the way for me. And then after I finished the boot camp, what started to happen then was that there were a lot of people doing boot camps. So you have a lot of people doing boot camps. You have people getting official educations from four-year schools. I think that's going to outweigh a boot camp, right? And so for me, it was just kind of, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm transitioning. Now I need to figure out what kind of formal education do I actually need? Because the boot camp is not it. It wasn't it. And that's really how I came upon WGU, because obviously, I mean, at that time, it happened during the pandemic. There was no going into a school. So I was looking for a legitimate online school, which surprisingly, I was very surprised at how long WGU was around, because at first I was like, is this like a legit school? Because how did I never hear about them? But once I got to WGU, anytime someone says something to me, I always say like I'm probably could be like a poster kid, because anytime someone, I'm like, WGU, oh my God, yes, I go there. Like, you'll love it. Like, you should attend. It's amazing experience being online, right? And we'll get into that. I started the WESIS chapter here, but even with that, because that wasn't something that WGU had done before, there's not really any outside organizations. Um, the amount of support I got with that also, again, it just always reassures that I made the right decision, coming on board here. I'm just looking forward to when there's like PhD programs so I can just come right back in.
Hey, you never know. We talked about it, but well, you never know. One thing I wanted to hit on, which was one of the main things that we wanted to talk about, was just leveraging your existing skill sets. So I'd love for you to kind of touch on how do you identify some of those skill sets and really market yourself. And I think we've heard this from a lot of alumni that we've recently connected with, where they talk about, hey, here are the skill sets that I obtained from WGU, and then I that alum might not necessarily be in that specific field that they studied to be in. They took certain skill sets away from their time at WGU and have kind of thought outside the box as far as, there might be other career opportunities for me. So I'd be interested to kind of learn, like, how do you potentially leverage some of those skills or identify what some of those skill sets might be?
Yeah, okay. And that's very important. And honestly, maybe like 3 days ago, LinkedIn released like this 15 top fastest growing skills for 2025, right? And I think that when we think about skills, it's not really like practical skills. The skills that you can transition over, like on this list, is like adaptability, right? Like these are the type of skills that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. These are the skills that are going to work regardless of where you are, right? And so when I think about adaptability, if anybody on here is interested in transitioning careers, you can write down that you have adaptability, right? Because you're already willing to adapt to the fact that this is change. And so for me, one of the things that um I like to do is all of the things that I did before I decided that I was transitioning. And when I really started realizing, like, okay, I really have to be serious and strategic about the moves that I'm making, because everything's changing very fast, right? And so I always say like not to be focused on these like job titles and to be more focused on skills. So what are like the common things that you are strong in across any career? That it just doesn't matter what career you're in, like stakeholder management was on the list, right? And these are things that it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you have that, you can pull that over. And so the skills that you'll need to have for whatever industry you're in, yes, you need those. But you want to be able to have these skills that go across any industry because honestly, at this point in this job market, you have to be ready to pivot, right? Like you really we see everything that's happening like right now with the job market. So you need to be ready to pivot. And so those skills that are kind of universal or the skills that you want to focus on when you're thinking about, okay, what skills can transition over to this job? Because no job is just about the skill that you do with the job. It's about how you can work in a team, right? Your cross-function communications, like there's those type of skills that if you have that, okay, so then once you know what you can bring over, then you can go and talk about like these are the industry specific skills.
And this might be, and I don't know if there is a right answer, but for you, like when did you realize, you know what, like I need to pivot? Like, is there is there a time where, I don't know if there's necessarily a red flag that pops up and tells somebody to pivot, and I think that's kind of hard for people to navigate and understand. Okay, like I do need to maybe
Yeah.
rethink. Like, can you bring up, maybe for you, like what was something that caused you to pivot?
We're gonna take the bus and I'm gonna call you when we need to list that. I gotta look on his phone.
Oh, I think someone needs to mute.
I gotcha. We're good.
um yeah, so for me, I I had a conversation, and this is honestly when I started saying, like, okay, I probably need to look at this a little differently. I call it like network Nancy because I like to like just have this block of time where I'm like having really intentional like networking activities. There was a woman that I knew, and this conversation really helped me to figure out what pivot looks like. Um, she is an executive cybersecurity. She's been in cybersecurity probably for about 15 years. She's a family friend, so I had the opportunity to have like a coffee chat with her. And she said, listen, it's first of all, there's really not entry levels in cybersecurity, just, being honest. And she said it's going to be really hard to stand out from the crowd when there's a lot of people now. Cybersecurity have become very trendy, and there's a lot of people that are entering the field. Um, so you need to be able to offer something else, right? Like you can do cybersecurity, but what else can you offer along with it? Because that's what's missing, right? And so having that conversation after that, I was just saying like, oh wow, okay, what else am I good at? What else do I do daily? And that's honestly where at that time, I had been working with like AI tools, like just from the start of it. And I was so fascinated by it. And I was like, well, I am really good with AI tools and not just like really good with them, like prompt engineering and all of that. So I said, how about I start like focusing like on this, like learn everything that I can because this is really new. There was like so much opportunity to learn different things. And because so many people didn't really know how to communicate well to get really good results, it gave me like a shoe-in kind of. So I started like helping people and setting up and taking my own, making my own little classes, and we're going to talk about like thinking outside the box to get experience. But that's really what I started doing. And for that, I like to say being able to pivot means having loose goals, Because if I didn't have loose goals and I was just so focused on, no, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be in cybersecurity, I wouldn't be doing really what I'm doing now. So you have to keep those goals loose because you just don't know where it's going to take you. I say now, especially with so much emerging technology, like
Right.
it's really hard. The job descriptions and jobs are disappearing because of artificial intelligence and automation can do a lot of jobs. So
And you had touched on a little bit with the networking piece, and I know that was another one of the main topics that we wanted to hit on. Um, how do you network? Like, what recommendations do you have? And I know for some people, it comes easy to certain individuals that, you had brought up like social butterflies that like, they like that interactive piece, but maybe it's individuals that, it's hard for them to network. Maybe you're naturally an introvert, and it takes a lot to connect with somebody. So what are some things that, you do to kind of build out that network?
yeah, so as you can tell, I'm a social butterfly. So I'm never talking to social butterflies, right? You know how to network. So that's not who I'm talking to. I'm always talking to the person that's the introvert because anyone that talks to me is like, well, you like to talk to people, so it's easy for you. So the networking hack that I use, even though I didn't need it, but it just works, is communities. Like joining a niche community for, let's say, I don't, they have communities for everything now, right? And so if you join, that's, for example, this is how I got to Lisa's. But joining these communities, right? They're so small, they're so intimate. So for an introvert, you're just literally texting with someone in a chat. But you know what happens? You start to get familiar with them, and maybe now you just ask a question like, do you know someone? This is what happens in these communities. Do we know anyone? Can someone take a look at this for me? Right? And so then that starts to happen. Another thing that happens in those communities are there are a lot of the conferences now. So when you're in there and you have people that are like, hey, did you hear about this conference? Are you going? Yeah, I'm going. So now you're going to go to the conference and you know someone, right? And so this is organic networking. I like that type of networking. I have never, when I used to just, I love information, right? I love to learn. I'll probably be in school for the rest of my life just because I love it, so I remember I'm always taking classes, whatever I see. And I took this class on LinkedIn networking. And the person was saying, like, you should be trying to make 50 to 100 connections a day. And I was like, what? Why would I be doing that? Like, I'm not, I can't, who has the time to talk to 50 or 100 people? I feel like if you are on, and this is how I use LinkedIn, this is how I've always used it. Even though I don't focus on, like job titles. Say I see a job. When I started, I never even knew that what I was doing was AI governance. That's, number one. I didn't know that's what it was. I just started doing it. And then what happened is if you start to look at job descriptions and then you start to look at the skills, right? So if you look at those skills and then you try to start lining them up with what you have, you can find out where the gaps are. And then if you take those job titles and you go on LinkedIn and start seeing who are the people that have these job titles, and then you go to their profile and start seeing what type of experience they have. And this is how you can line that up with you. But what you also do, for me, even though I'm a social butterfly, I do like to be strategic in when I'm reaching out to someone so it's worthy and it's impactful, right? And so maybe for me, it's like, okay, once I do this, then I'm going to reach out to this person and then I can say like, hey, I'm, doing this as well. And I'd love to have a conversation with you. So I'd rather say like reach out to one person. If you have something, one thing that's great about LinkedIn now is they have AI built in. So it'll tell you immediately what you have in common. It'll write for you the message to the person, which is perfect for an introvert. You don't have to write it. It'll write to you the message to the person, which you should say, hey, we have this in common, right? And so if you're reaching out to them, that's really it. That's the start of it. You reach out to them, wait a little while, comment on a few of their things, and then just swallow and ask for a coffee chat. That is like, you know, and when you start to think about it now, just say, I'm going to channel my inner network Nancy or network Nate, whichever you choose. But that is what I do. I call it like the network Nancy hour. And for me, I'll just like, oh, there's a list of people I need to reach out to, you know, like this person, because I want to have a conversation with them about this. It always leads to something. You know, it always leads to something. It always leads you here, and either now you need to make a right or you need to make a left. What I will say though, in taking all of that in, you still have to know that these are just suggestions, right? Like these are just people, they're not in your shoes. It's not their career. So you should never just say like, oh, they told me to do this, so I'm doing it. Because I remember I had someone that, you know, worked at Netflix that I knew, and I wound up having a conversation with them before I was going to do my MBA. And he was like, you don't need your MBA. Don't, if I had it to do it over, I wouldn't do it. You don't need it. And for me, it felt like you can say that on the side of experience. You can say that, but I'm transitioning. So for me, I need something to show that I'm transitioning, you know, like here. And that for me was a decision that I made. Everybody, you have to make your decision for yourself and just don't blindly listen to people telling you like, you should do this. Had I listened to him, I wouldn't be getting my MBA, and I kind of wouldn't be having the opportunities, you know, that I have now. So just keep that in mind too.
And we do have a question in the chat. I do want to just touch on, before I get to the chat question though, the reason why we've connected, Kina, is women in cybersecurity. And I'd love for you to kind of share how you came about to that, creating that here at WGU, because I think that kind of ties into this networking piece.
Yeah.
If you would share kind of how that came about and how that's come to fruition.
Perfect. Yeah. So WESAs, that speaks to the community thing. And I'll go back a little bit. I was in boot camp, right? And so in boot camp, I have just always been a very inquisitive girl. I ask a lot of questions, right? Like I want to know why this is happening, or, oh, wow, well, what about this? That's just who I am. When I was in boot camp, that first class that I was in, it was probably 90 people. It was virtual. And I was the only Black woman there, right? And I was just like, oh, wow. It's like, are there not Black people in cyber? That was like really like my thought. And I literally Googled Black people in cyber. And there was a community that popped up, Blacks in cyber. So that is what introduced me to these niche communities, right? And so I got into that community, and I was in there, and I started, you know, like volunteering, love it. And then I was just like, huh, okay. But there's still such a, even in that community, there's still so few women. So I started Googling like stats in cybersecurity, but then I met someone in there, and we were having that conversation. I was like, it's just like not a lot of women in this industry. And they were like, oh, did you ever hear about women in cybersecurity? That's another community. I was like, oh my God, there's like communities for everything. So I was like, oh, perfect. I joined Women in Cybersecurity, and there was just so many like programs, and just this was all virtually, just online, and just different opportunities. I didn't even have to network. Like once I joined, there were just people just reaching out like, hey, what are you working on? It was just, what are you trying to do? You're transitioning. What is it that you're looking in to get into? For me, I am not technical, and I've always wanted to be on the business side of cybersecurity, business side of, you know, AI governance. I like business. So I went to my first conference at WESA's as a transitioner with a digital pretty background that's not technical or serious, and I felt so welcomed, right? There was like no one there that made me feel like you shouldn't be here, right? Like I was connecting, I was networking with different people. And I didn't have to. If I'm just like walking around, went there by myself, but I used the tactic of someone in the community that was going. And I was like, oh, we can connect when we're there. And we did, but I really didn't need to. It was very welcoming. And so I was at the Career Growth Hub, which this year, next week, is the WISA Cybersecurity Conference. And I'm actually sitting on the board of the Career Growth Hub now. Like, there's that. So I was at the Career Growth Hub and I met this woman that sat on the board and we got to talking. And I said, yeah, I go to WGU. She said, I graduated from WGU. I said, look at that. So we were like talking about WGU. And I was like, I can't believe WGU, like, why don't we have a WESIS? It's like, we need one. And she was like, well, we don't have one because you haven't created it yet. And that is what started the journey for me creating WESIS, which has been a long one, but it's here. It's been a long journey. And that's kind of how I met RJ, because I literally would just be emailing everyone like, hey, do you do this? I just started WESIS. Can you do this, like for me? Can you post this for me? Like, hey, I just found out about you from anytime there was someone on an email, and I would like write it down and be like, oh, this is who this is. Because I mentioned earlier that WGU was very supportive in this, but they also have not done it. All of the kind of groups that they have were created here, and they've also just been here for a long time, right? And so there's just like a new president that comes in, but they're not building it from scratch. So building it from scratch looks very, very different. And I'm also just a very persistent person that doesn't take no for an answer. So when they were kind of like, yeah, well, we'll see, I was like, okay. So I reached out to Mike, like the head of cybersecurity, School of IT. And I was like, if I can just have like a meeting with you guys to present, and he let me present, and I had like all the stats on women in cybersecurity and why we need WESIS. And I was like halfway through, they were like, we're sold. I was like, all right, so here we go. And so that's how, WESIS came about. And we are, even as I'm graduating, it is not where it should be, but I wanted to get all the heavy lifting out of the way because I don't mind it. But once I leave, I didn't want it to have so much heavy lifting that people give up on it, because it really is like a great organization, very, very helpful and impactful for me with my career transition. Because I feel like if I went to that conference and I didn't feel as welcomed as I did there, that might have changed what I thought about moving forward just to tech in general. Because transitioning into tech from any other background sometimes, and this is just the type of background that I come from, which is a creative, can seem very intimidating, right? Like it can seem very intimidating transitioning from a creative background. For me though, I just use all of my creatives here because I'm definitely not what you expect, like in tech, even the way I write. And I tend to say that I speak to the non-tech people, like I'm a translator, right? Like I feel like I'm a middle person between someone that's, like in tech and someone that has no idea what they're talking about.
I love it. Question that came in through the chat. In your journey, at what point in your educational or learning career did you feel prepared or ready to apply for and get a job in an IT field?
Ooh, okay. So I feel like I'm a little different. I wanted to start, like, I would get like one little, I don't know, Z-level certification and be like, yes, I'm going to apply for this job now. I mean, I applied for not even just jobs, but internships. And we didn't even touch on the internships and how, being a career transitioner, you're kind of at the bottom of the list on that. So for me, applying for a job in the IT field, I think I probably started applying for it and when it looked like this is going nowhere fast. For me, I'm an entrepreneur by heart, right? And so I'm also a person that if there's no opportunity, I'm going to create one. It's just who I am. So still would be applying for jobs now because I do my own consulting. That's actually what I do. But outside of that, I'm still applying for jobs because I still love to have a job in the actual governance space of a larger organization, maybe. But right now, I'm very passionate about working with small and mid-sized businesses. What I will tell you, when I say have loose goals, if you are trying to apply for an a job in the IT field, think outside of the box, meaning like don't apply to the jobs that maybe you feel like this is like your dream job, right? Or this is a dream company that you want to work for. Apply for them, but also apply for the other companies that maybe people look for small businesses, right? Look for work for small businesses. Or one of the other things that you can do is just get in the door. Get in the door. Get in the door with any job and then work your way up from the inside. That's always easier. Like right now, applying to jobs, I'm just going to be honest. I had a conversation with someone yesterday that was said she's been applying for management jobs within her company for almost a year now. She's been applying. And the problem that she's running into is there's the return to office. People are now deciding that they'd rather take a pay cut than go back into the office. They'd rather work from home and go into a lower level job. So what that means is some of those lower level jobs that people coming into the field may qualify for, they're now fighting with executives that are in the company already, have the expertise, but are willing to take a pay cut just to stay working from home. So those are things to consider. I think probably for like the next year until people decide like, I don't know how much you can live off of, just to stay working from home, but these are the things that you have to consider. So when I say have loose goals, that's what I mean. You got to have loose goals and you got to look in places that aren't ideal for these IT jobs. Because a lot of times I think when people think, I want to apply for a job and you immediately go to a tech company or you're immediately going to the bigger firms. Look in all the industries and see who are the people that most people aren't applying to, right? Like small business, mid-sized businesses. And if you don't have like any experience, I would say maybe try nonprofits, right? Like you have to, and this is part of thinking outside of the box. You have to go where people appreciate your help. You have to go where people appreciate your help because one of the problems, what happens is we all have, we're getting the education part. We're getting the certifications. That's such a small part of it. I read like a study the other day that said maybe something like 70% of people are getting jobs based on networking and not based on your application or what you know. So if you factor that in, education and certifications is a very small part of what it's going to take for you to land a job now. Sad, but very true.
And I'd love for you to touched on just like gaining more experience, maybe thinking outside the box as far as other opportunities. What are some other things that maybe people might be able to do to gain more experience? Do you have recommendations on what you've seen that's worked for individuals, or maybe recommendations that you've seen from professionals in the field?
Yeah. So I mentioned the nonprofits. There's like a bunch of different like websites now that you can go to where they're specifically there for you to gain experience working with real organizations. And so one of the things too, and I said small businesses, I've always had a sweet spot for small businesses because, again, in the background, I've always been a small business owner, so I know how rough it is. That is always a strong area for me. So when I've seen that, I used to be applying for so many internships, just trying to get some experience. I was like, this is not working. I'm not getting, like any opportunities because there's so many people competing for these internships. I'm like, I know a lot of small business owners, right? Like I know that they do not have anyone at all. They don't even know anything about cybersecurity, but they're operating in a space online. And so one of the things that I started doing, and to be honest, before I started doing that, I have a family group chat that I started on WhatsApp. My family is huge. It's probably like 100 people in the group chat, and that's not even a fraction. So I told them that, like, anybody want to know, um, I was like polling what everyone does at their job, right? So I was like, I want to do like a cybersecurity awareness training. That was the first training. I had these trainings every other Saturday with my, like my family, giving them like cybersecurity awareness training. And I was running through it, like kind of just give me some feedback. Like, how is, does this feel like, and like, I remember one of my aunts was like, oh, I feel like I'm at work. This is so professional. So I was just like, yeah. So did I put down that I've conducted cybersecurity trainings? Of course I did. Right. And then when I started doing it for small businesses, I was doing it at first just volunteering. How many employees do you have? You ask enough of questions, and not to say, but you ask enough of questions that people are going to say no to because they have no idea. So then that puts like a fear in them, like, wait, should I be doing this? Well, do you know about this? Can you help with this? And that's really how I got started, right? But that's all experience. It's free, but you got to do it. There's not going to be another way for you to, not that there's not going to be another way, but I don't have time to wait. I like to, this is not working. Okay, I'm not attached to anything. And again, I say it again, that's the loose goals. So I'm not attached. I would see like this. I wanted to do this cybersecurity program in Washington. And I got to like the last part of it. And I was doing so good. And then I realized that it said that you had to be under 28. And I was like, what? Like, that just knocked me out of the box because I'm not under 28. And so I, that could have just made me, there have been so many rejections in this. And I'm going to say this, when you are doing a career transition quickly, I suggest there's this thing called a failure resume. And so it becomes very mechanical. Otherwise, you're going to be emotionally attached to everybody rejecting you. Right. And so for me, it was just like, okay, I'm either going to put this on this resume or my failure resume that it didn't work out, because you're going to have to get into that quickly. Otherwise, you'll be so stuck on, oh, I didn't get it. Now what? So instead, I would have a list of things. I'm doing this today. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm looking into this. I'm looking into this. Okay, this didn't work out. This didn't work out. Okay, let me look into this. This is what's been happening it's a very active. And so hence why I've become extremely passionate about career transitions, because it just raised so many questions for me. Like, is what everyone's going through? And so when I started talking to people about it, they're like, yeah. And I don't know that we're handling it is like, you're excited talking about it, but I got excited because now I'm able to have conversations. And I think that sometimes some of the way that I think of things, maybe people aren't considering that in their transition, just where I'm pulling from. Again, I'm a creative thinker. So I'm just always like thinking of like, maybe, okay, so let's add this and then we'll try this. And if this doesn't work, we'll have to go this way. That landed me where I am. And then again, with the loose goals along my transition, I became a podcast producer and writer. That wasn't on the board, but it just came about from being the network Nancy that I am. And I'm a writer. And that just came about. My loose goals allowed that to be fit in there. And those are also opportunities, because I still talk about some of the podcasts that I produce for. I've actually created AI literacy training for their actual employees. So there's always like opportunity. You just have to look outside of, even if it's like the local store that you go to all the time, depending on what it is, whatever we're into, all industries need different skills, right? And so whatever you're into, just see what's around you first. many jobs that you're
And we just had a question that came in as you're going through, Kina, and reading that. I'm just going to set a reminder to everyone. Session is being recorded, so you will get that recording. I'm also going to share now the feedback form. We would love for you to take a couple minutes once the session's done, fill out that feedback form. Like I said, a lot of our sessions that we've run have come from your feedback. We're certainly interested to hear, different things that you might be potentially looking for in future sessions. So take the time to fill that out. Like I said, it should take you no more than 2 minutes. And then, Kina, I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, so I love this question because early on I used to do this. I think like as we transition, we we're almost afraid of looking entry level, right? So because of that, we start like putting everything we've done in our last careers that aren't relevant. And so, and maybe, RJ can speak to this being in his industry, with employment, but it's unfortunate, right? But it does look like you may be untrainable sometimes when you're looking like I remember before early on, I used to put like, oh yeah, I was the manager of a call, Barney's call center before that. And then I was the senior, you know, social media community manager. So it's just like, and now I'm applying for this entry level job. It may seem like you're coming over, even though I'm coming here just saying like, I just want to start over. So don't put all of that there. Only put the things, and so where we talked about those skills, only put the things that have those skills that show up in the job that you did versus the job that you're applying for. Because if you're putting a bunch of jobs on there that aren't relevant, it may just look like, oh, you're too overqualified, even though you aren't, right? So I wouldn't put the jobs on there that aren't necessarily relevant to what it is that you're doing. And if you do not have anything on there that's relevant, rewind back to what I just said, which is getting the experience from, look, I started with my family, right? I had to get some type of experience like with this cybersecurity awareness and being able to, talk to non-technical people. So that was my audience. I felt like if I could have these classes with my family and they get it, they can leave here knowing that you should not be clicking on the link that says that you just want to cruise. If I can get them to leave here and look at that and look at this email and say like, this is not Sarah from across the street saying that she's in this other country and she's about to marry a prince, but she left her wallet. If I can get them to not do that, then I feel like I've done, like a good job. So start to look around you, but you have my LinkedIn. I promise I am so open to discussing, like if you want like 15 minutes, because this is going to end and I wouldn't have time, but I'm happy to put something on my calendar to help anywhere I can. And I do that because, again, I'm always talking to the person that's an introvert. Me, I'm going to ask. And if you don't answer me, I'll just like wait like a week, put it on my calendar to be like, hey, did you see my message? I've done that to RJ. So everyone's not like me. And I understand that. So that's why I try to be as helpful as I can, because I honestly, I know that it's intimidating.
And to piggyback off of that, I know in our career office, for resumes, specifically for those, like if you had a bunch of jobs, like if you're applying for something, you only want to list accurate and relevant information. So if you have a job that you feel like, hey, none of the skills that I obtained in this job or within that job role are relevant to the job that you're applying for, don't list it. And that's where like we just a base resume, and that base resume might be 5 or 6 pages long, especially if you have a ton of experience. For each resume that you're going and submitting to an employer for a job opportunity, like that should be customized towards that specific job. So you're only including those job opportunity or that experience that is relevant to that specific job. So, you might have a job where you have you apply for one position and you list, that same job, you have 6 or 7 bullet points for that specific job. The next one that you apply for, maybe you only have one, or you don't even list that set experience for that job that you're applying for. So it varies depending on your job experience. And then if an employer asks you about it, you just share that and say, listen, like I didn't list that experience because it's not relevant to the job that I'm interviewing for currently. So the more upfront you are, the better in that type of situation. I'll give people a second. If you do have additional questions, you wanted to raise your hand and ask any questions, post those into the chat. Reminder, this session is recorded. And then if you joined us late and you wanted to just to network a little bit, share your LinkedIn in the chat. And that way we can get connected and start to build out your professional network here.
And I want to say, as far as building out your professional network, you want to do that because it's helpful for me. I'm always trying new strategies on LinkedIn, but again, I don't have a problem asking. I'll send like a mass message to people that I know and say, hey, I just posted this. I need the engagement to go up there and comment. And that's where these communities come in place, where you have these different people. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. I like to be honest and transparent, because I don't think it's relatable if I sit up here and I'm just like telling you like, oh, it's all great. And, I have like this happening. I'm going to tell you the strategies that I'm using so you can implement them, right? Like Network Nancy, make sure you reach out to people if you're putting something on LinkedIn and just say like, hey, can you repost this? And if you don't have people that you can reach out to, then that's the homework that you're walking away with. There's a bunch of people here. Everyone should be able to take everyone's LinkedIn. I am not in the chat seeing everyone's LinkedIn. I did list mine twice. Please reach out to me so we can be connected. If you post something, I will be the first one there to comment on it.
We did have a couple questions come in. First, Drew said, I love your energy, Ms. Kina. Where do you find that energy source?
I'm a real go-getter, right? And I like to be, that gets me like very excited. Being able to help people. And so just overall, my career goal, when I say strategic thinking, one of the biggest parts of my career goal was being able to create impact. That's what I wanted, right? When I said I want to transition, I said I want me losing my job during the pandemic really helped me change my perspective. And so I said I wanted to create impacts. And because of that, it kind of shaped the different things that I wanted to do, right? Starting the WESIS chapter, being over Women in AI Governance of Florida. I'm the regional chair for that. And just doing things like this and offering to have conversations with people to help them navigate transitioning. I don't know that I'm helping you like necessarily land a job, right? But I am willing to help you get closer to that just by implementing some strategies that actually do work. And you want to know why they work? Because I'm here talking to you about career transitions, and then I actually have a consulting firm in AI governance when that's not even something that I was doing a year ago. That's all about me putting these strategies into place to get to the goal that I wanted to. I saw another question.
Yeah, I can read it off to you, and then we'll do this last question, and then Kina, I want to give you an opportunity if you had any closing remarks for everybody. Love for you to share those. Question was, I have my first prelim interview on Thursday for an IT role. How did you approach your interviews when entering the new field?
Ooh, ask a lot of questions. That's another way to network, right? If you're talking to someone and they know more than you know what I realized? When you ask them questions, they love to talk, like me, right? And so that is a network. Go through it. Once they finish, ask them some questions. What do my first 90 days? These are like the regular, like general questions, but what do my first 90 days, like look like? and you don't necessarily have to ask IT specific questions. You can ask general questions because you don't, I remember before talking to somebody that gave me some advice, like, don't look online and start seeing different terms, right? And when you go to an interview, you start saying them, and then when they ask you about them, you actually don't know, right? And so do your research on the role. I would definitely do your research on the role, right? And so doing that, so when you're going in there and you're speaking, it's much more thoughtful and authentic. Everybody knows that everyone's looking for jobs now, right? And you may just be going down apply, especially with LinkedIn. You can do this really quick, like apply. So I would definitely do your homework on the company. Make sure you can tell them why you're applying for this role outside of needing a job. Did you look on the company's website? See what you can connect with the values, the mission, something. Be able to speak to something with the company so it's very authentic. And what that would do for you when you do that is honestly knowing whether or not that's a company that you want to work for. And then ask those other questions, like, what would this job look like? Ask those questions, the questions that you have in your mind, I would ask them. And good luck. I hope that helps.
That was fantastic. Kina, I want to give you a final opportunity. Any closing remarks, anything that you wanted to plug for those in attendance?
So I gave you my LinkedIn. I am probably a few paragraphs away from writing an article to be published about career transitions or like breakups. It's really like true. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see that. But I am truthfully, if anyone connects with me and you're willing and you want to have a conversation, I am more than happy to chat about that. I'm actually, speaking of me saying joining communities, I'm actually starting like a career transition community. I'm just figuring out a name. But there's a need for it because I literally have people that reach out to me daily with a lot of what the other person asked, just with having an overload of experience in transitioning and how to navigate that. So I thank you so much for this hour. I hope that this was helpful, that I was able to provide someone with some information or just a thought process that you weren't thinking about.
Kina, that was fantastic. So I want to thank you for jumping in and sharing your story and then sharing just insights as far as those career transitions. Those are tough. Like it's tough, especially if you had talked about like this was your dream job that you were in, and then you had to transition out of that. Like that's difficult for somebody to do that. So we certainly appreciate you jumping in and sharing those insights. And thank you everyone for jumping in as well. And I know that you at least took one thing away from the session. So thank you everybody. And reminder, session was recorded. We'll be emailing that out, so keep an eye out for that email. So thank you everyone and have a fantastic rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.